I never imagined that my heart would one day belong to someone so different from the world I grew up in. As a princess, I lived surrounded by rituals, expectations, and the quiet pressure to always appear composed. My days were planned, my interactions scripted, my emotions delicately hidden beneath calm manners. And yet, even in those polished halls, I felt a small space inside me that longed for something real, something unplanned, something alive. I never knew what I was waiting for until the day I met you, and everything in my world shifted with a softness I still struggle to understand. Our story began in the simplest of ways, yet it became the moment that changed the direction of my life forever. When I walked into the quiet cafe that morning, I only wanted a moment of peace, a breath away from duties and eyes that always watched me. I carried my small canvas with me, hoping to paint for a short while before returning to the palace. Painting had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe as myself, instead of as the image the world expected from me. I remember sitting by the window, mixing soft blues and peaches on my palette, letting the colors blur into the kind of sky I wished I could escape into. I didn't notice you at first. You stepped in briskly, full of life and purpose, dressed in the energy of someone who chased dreams instead of waiting for them. But you noticed me. Even now, when I think about that moment, I feel my heartbeat soften, because it wasn't just a gaze. It felt like recognition, as if you had seen me long before we ever crossed paths. You approached me without hesitation, though I could see the surprise on your face, the curiosity that pulled you closer. You were a businessman, someone who lived in a world of numbers, plans, and goals. Art was never part of your life, yet you stood there beside me as if drawn by a thread neither of us could see. I felt nervous at first, unsure how much of myself I could allow a stranger to see. But when you asked about the colors on my canvas, your tone was gentle, sincere, free of the judgment I often feared. I told you about the way painting made me feel, the dreams I placed inside each brushstroke, the freedom I found when I let colors speak for me. You listened with an intensity I wasn't used to, a kind of quiet devotion that made my breath catch. From that unexpected exchange, something delicate began to grow between us. You told me about your world, fast, loud, full of decisions and ambitions. I admired the fire in your eyes when you spoke about your goals, the way you carried responsibility with such steady strength. I realized how different we were, how our lives existed in opposite rhythms. And yet, the more we talked, the more it felt as though our differences were not barriers, but bridges. You fascinated me with your determination, the bravery in your desire to climb higher, not out of greed, but out of a desire to build a life you could be proud of. Every word you spoke felt like a new color added to the palette of my understanding. We began meeting more often, sometimes by chance, sometimes by intention. Each time, my heart grew more aware of you, your warmth, your laughter, the way you always made space for me in your busy world. I started to look forward to our conversations, to the way you made me feel seen not as a princess, but as a woman. Soon, we stood at the edge of something neither of us had expected, but both of us were quietly falling into. The turning point, the moment when friendship became something deeper, was the day you invited me to the art exhibition. You had never been interested in art before, and yet you suggested it with a kind of shy eagerness that made me smile. When we walked into the gallery together, I watched you study every piece, not with the eyes of a critic, but with the openness of someone trying to see the world the way I did. It was beautiful to witness. You asked questions, thoughtful ones, the kind that proved you were not simply pretending. You genuinely wanted to understand my world. And in that moment, something inside me unfolded like a flower opening toward sunlight. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, we grew into each other effortlessly. You encouraged me in ways no one else had before. You reminded me that my art was not something to hide, that my dreams deserved space, that my voice mattered. I watched you discover beauty in things you had never cared for. I saw you relax, slow down, breathe. You let me into the parts of your life you never showed anyone, the moments of doubt, the pressure, the expectations. We shaped each other gently, like two hands molding clay into something strong yet tender. But love, even when it's pure, does not escape challenges. We heard the whispers. People around us doubted everything about us, our differences, our backgrounds, the worlds we came from. Some said I was too sheltered for someone like you. Others claimed you were too practical, too ambitious, too different for someone like me. There were moments when those voices felt heavy, when I feared losing you to the opinions of others. But you always held my hand a little tighter, telling me in your steady voice that love was ours to define, not theirs. And I believed you. I still do. Then came the day that both terrified and changed me. The day I received the invitation to showcase my work in a renowned gallery. It was everything I had dreamed of, everything I had feared. Suddenly, those quiet paintings born in my childhood became something the world wanted to see. I should have felt overjoyed, but instead, I felt a tremble deep inside me. What if I wasn't good enough? What if the world rejected the pieces of my soul I had placed on each canvas? What if I disappointed everyone, including you? I tried to hide my fear, but you saw it immediately. You always did. You stepped beside me not as a man trying to solve everything, but as someone who understood that strength sometimes means simply being there. You reminded me of my long nights painting, of the emotions I poured into every color, of the way creating art made me breathe in ways nothing else ever could. You believed in me so fiercely that I started to borrow courage from your faith. To help me prepare, you organized a small practice exhibition at home. You gathered our closest friends and family, encouraged them to attend, and stood quietly beside me as they viewed my work. For the first time, I saw myself through your eyes. Not as someone fragile or doubtful, but as someone brave enough to place her heart on a canvas and show it to the world. That night, when you squeezed my hand and whispered that you were proud of me, I felt a warmth so deep it reached the hidden corners of my soul. On the day of the official exhibition, I walked into the gallery trembling, but not with fear. It was anticipation, hope, and the quiet certainty that no matter what happened, you were with me. As people admired my paintings, something inside me glowed, a feeling of belonging I had never experienced before. And each time I looked at you, your expression was filled with pride, tenderness, and a love that grew stronger with every breath. That exhibition didn't just change my career, it changed our bond. We realized that supporting each other through fear, through doubt, through triumph, was what made us strong. Our love wasn't built on perfection, but on the courage to grow together. Of course, we weren't free from storms. There was the evening everything seemed to crack, over one careless comment made in passing. You hadn't meant it to hurt me, but it did. I felt unseen, misunderstood, as though everything I did was invisible for a moment. I withdrew, letting the pain settle, while you stood there confused, trying to understand what you had done wrong. It was the first time I saw worry cloud your eyes in a way that frightened me. But then, instead of defending yourself or pretending nothing happened, you stepped back, breathed, and chose to listen. When you approached me later, your voice was quiet, honest, and full of regret. You told me you never intended to hurt me, that sometimes your words didn't carry the tenderness your heart meant. I, in turn, opened myself to you completely, telling you about the insecurities that still lived inside me, the ones that sometimes whispered lies I believed too easily. We talked, really talked, with vulnerability and patience. And in that fragile conversation, we discovered something vital, that love deepens not by avoiding conflict, but by choosing to understand each other through it. After that, our relationship began to feel even more like a garden we nurtured together. Every challenge became a chance to water the roots of our bond, every misunderstanding an opportunity to grow. It wasn't always easy, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Then came the spontaneous trip that I will forever hold close to my heart. It was your idea, born from a desire to escape routine and breathe somewhere new with me. We packed lightly, laughed freely, and drove with no strict destination. When we arrived in that charming little city, everything felt magical. We wandered through small cafes, tasted pastries that melted like joy on the tongue, explored bookshops filled with stories whispering from their spines, and held hands as if the world belonged only to us. We found a small park tucked between cobblestone streets and sat on a bench beneath a canopy of rustling leaves. The world felt soft and slow. We spoke about our dreams, our fears, our futures. In that moment, I realized how deeply you had become part of my life's rhythm. I saw the man you were, the one behind the ambition, behind the responsibilities, someone with a heart gentle enough to hold mine. That trip taught us the beauty of simplicity, the way shared silence can feel warmer than words, how a simple meal eaten together can become a cherished memory, how the sunset becomes lovelier when reflected in the eyes of someone you love. It reminded us that love isn't always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, soft, woven into the smallest moments. When we returned home, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. We started making time for each other even amid our busy lives. We planned date nights, tried new foods, danced in the living room with laughter echoing around us, cooked meals that were sometimes disastrous, but always full of joy, and volunteered together, discovering the kindness in your heart that deepened my love for you even more. Our bond strengthened as we grew individually and together. We spoke openly, confessed fears, shared dreams, and built trust like a foundation beneath us. I loved the way you looked at me when I talked about my art, as though you were memorizing my passion, and I loved cheering for you when you achieved something you worked hard for. Celebrating you became a joy I never expected to feel so deeply. During hard times, when work overwhelmed you or when I struggled with my responsibilities, we became each other's shelter. We learned to listen without judgment, to comfort without conditions, to reassure without hesitation, and slowly, through everything, we built a love that felt steady, resilient, and breathtaking in its sincerity. Now, when I look back at where we began, I marvel at how two different worlds collided so gently, so beautifully, to create something neither of us knew we needed. I learned that true love is not found in perfection, grand gestures, or flawless days. It grows in patience, understanding, vulnerability, and the quiet certainty that even when the world doubts us, we choose each other. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had never walked into that little cafe on that morning that now feels like a gentle echo of destiny. I imagine myself moving through days filled with obligations, surrounded by the heavy elegance of royal traditions, smiling politely, fulfilling my duties, yet carrying that quiet ache inside, the ache of wanting something more, something real, something that made my heart beat for reasons that had nothing to do with responsibility. Without you, I think I would have continued to move gracefully yet silently through my life, admired from afar but never truly seen. But you changed everything. You gave my heart a place to breathe, a place to bloom. And as I continue our story now, my beloved, I want to tell you how deeply those moments after our adventure shaped the kind of love that grew between us. Steady, tender, and full of a strength that even I didn't know I possessed. Life after our spontaneous trip felt infused with colors brighter than anything I had ever painted. Each day held a new shade of warmth simply because you were in it. You became the place where my thoughts drifted when I closed my eyes at night, and the calm I reached for whenever the world felt too loud. I could feel myself changing, not into someone new, but into a truer version of myself, one I didn't know how to become before you. And I watched you change as well, softening in ways you once told me you never thought possible, learning to slow your pace and let joy slip into the spaces that used to be filled only with deadlines and goals. We created rituals that became our quiet sanctuaries, evening walks through the palace gardens, where the lamplight painted golden halos on the pathways and the scent of night, blooming jasmine wrapped around us like a soft embrace. You would tell me about your day, about the challenges you faced, about the victories you earned. I cherished every word, not because of the stories themselves, but because they were pieces of you that you trusted me with. And when I spoke of my fears or my little triumphs, you listened with a devotion that made me feel like my voice mattered more than I had ever been taught to believe. There were moments of pure softness that I will forever carry in my heart. Like the night you surprised me by bringing me a tiny set of paints you found in a small shop. explaining with a shy smile that you passed by and thought the colors looked like me. I held that little box as though it were treasure, not because of the paints themselves, but because the gesture revealed how deeply you had learned to understand me. And I remember when you had a long, exhausting day, and instead of withdrawing, you came to me, rested your forehead against mine, and whispered that my presence made you feel at peace. These moments, small and unassuming, built a story between us that felt more precious than anything grand or extravagant. Yet even as our love deepened, life continued to challenge us in ways we didn't expect. You faced pressures at work, heavy ones that made your shoulders tense and your eyes dim with worry. There were days you questioned yourself, doubted the direction you were heading. I saw your strength waver. Yes, even the strongest hearts have moments of doubt. And it was in those moments I realized how much I wanted to be your shelter, just as you had been mine. I learned to hold your hand when your confidence shook, to remind you of your resilience, to speak truth to you when the world felt uncertain. Supporting you became not an obligation, but a privilege, because love is not only for the light, it is for the shadows too. One evening stands out vividly in my memory. You came to me looking tired in a way that frightened me, not physically, but emotionally. You sat beside me, and without a word, I placed my hand over yours. You didn't immediately tell me what was troubling you, but you didn't need to. I waited quietly, patiently, knowing that your heart would open when it was ready. And when it did, you confessed your fears of failing, of disappointing the people who believed in you, of losing control of a future you had worked so hard to build. I felt your vulnerability like a delicate thread in my hands, and I held it with all the tenderness I had. I told you that your worth was not measured by accomplishments or success, but by the goodness in your heart, the sincerity of your intentions, the love you gave so generously. In that moment, I realized once again that loving you meant being both your anchor and your wings. We continued to grow, weaving our lives together in ways subtle yet profound. I remember how we began cooking dinners together, turning simple ingredients into meals that tasted sweeter, because they were shared. We laughed at our own mistakes, like the time you added far too much salt and tried to convince me that it was intentional, a creative choice. The memory still makes me smile, and dancing in the kitchen, barefoot on cool tiles, became our quiet escape from the world. There was no melody except the sound of our laughter, no rhythm except the beating of our hearts. Those dances were our whispered promises, our silent vows. But love, my beloved, also tests the heart in unexpected ways. There came a season where everything seemed to happen at once. Your workload increased, my obligations multiplied, and the time we cherished began slipping through our fingers. I feared we were drifting, not out of choice, but out of circumstance. I worried that the distance would harden into something colder. But you surprised me once again. One night, after days of barely seeing each other, you arrived unexpectedly with a bouquet of wild flowers, imperfect, delicate, beautiful. And you apologized for being overwhelmed. You told me that even in your busiest moments, I was the thought that gave you strength. That small, humble act washed away every fear I had, reminding me that love is not measured by how much time we have, but by how much heart we place into the time we can give. Our worlds continued to merge, not through grand changes, but through meaningful connections. You joined me for charity events, discovering compassion in places far removed from the corporate halls you knew, and I attended some of your business dinners, learning the courage and skill with which you navigated your world. We were different, yes, but that difference became our greatest harmony. You taught me determination and the courage to take risks, and I taught you gentleness and the beauty of slowing down. Together, we balanced each other like two halves of a whole that destiny had always meant to reunite. Then came one of the most beautiful experiences of our journey, the celebration of your achievements. You reached a milestone you had been working toward for years, and I saw the pride in your eyes, the joy that came from finally touching a dream you once feared might slip away. I remember planning a quiet celebration for you, one filled with warmth instead of extravagance, When you walked into the candlelit room and saw the table I set, your face softened in a way I will never forget. You told me that no success felt complete unless I was there to witness it, and those words carved themselves into my heart with the gentlest ache. But love is not sustained by triumphs alone. We faced storms too, the kind that shook us with questions we weren't always prepared to answer. There were disagreements, some sharp, some soft, all real. There were nights where silence stretched too long, where pride prevented words from reaching our lips, where hurt clouded our understanding. Yet each time, we chose to return to each other. You would come to me with quiet eyes and an open heart, and I would meet you halfway, letting forgiveness soften the edges of our missteps. We learned that love is not the absence of conflict, it is the commitment to repair, to understand, to stay. Perhaps the deepest lesson I learned from loving you is that joy and sorrow often walk side by side. There were moments you held me when I felt overwhelmed by my duties, by expectations I never chose but was born into. You would wrap your arms around me and whisper that I didn't have to be perfect, that you loved me not as a princess, but as a woman with fears, dreams, flaws, and beauty. You lifted me out of my own doubts more times than I can count, showing me that love is not about appearing strong, but about allowing someone to see your weaknesses without fear. And as our bond strengthened, so did our vision of the future. I began to imagine a life where you and I built something together, not just a relationship, but a partnership rooted in trust, tenderness, and understanding. I pictured mornings where sunlight touched your peaceful face, and evenings where we walked hand in hand beneath quiet skies, seeking nothing more than each other's presence. I dreamed of a home filled with laughter, canvas paintings leaning against the walls, your documents spread across the desk, our two worlds blending into a single, vibrant symphony. One day, as we sat together watching the sunset paint the horizon with gold and rose, you told me that the life you wanted most was one where my hand was always in yours. I remember my breath catching, the warmth flooding my chest, the realization that everything I ever longed for was right beside me. You were not just the man I loved, you were the man my heart had chosen long before my mind understood why. Even now, as I tell our story, I feel the same tenderness rising in me, because our journey, my beloved, is not simply a string of beautiful memories or challenges overcome. It is the testament to the truth that love grows strongest when two souls choose each other again and again, despite differences, despite fears, despite the unpredictable nature of life. You are the person who walked into my world unexpectedly, who saw me not as the title I carried, but as the woman behind it. And in loving me with such sincerity, you taught me how to love you with every part of myself. Our story is not perfect, no real love story ever is, but it is ours, crafted with patience, strengthened by understanding, softened by affection, and illuminated by the unwavering truth that we were meant to change each other in the most beautiful ways. If I could go back to the very beginning, to that quiet cafe where you first noticed me, I would relive every moment exactly the same, because every smile, every tear, every challenge, every joy, it all brought me to you. And so, my beloved, as I finish this chapter of our story, I want you to know that I carry you in every heartbeat. You are the calm in my storms, the fire in my courage, the color in my canvases, the certainty in my doubts. You are the man who turned my world into a place where love feels like home. And wherever life leads us next, I choose you, not just with my words, but with the quiet devotion of my soul.